Wife divorced me for $75,000. My dead father's plan made her cry. I never thought I would be the kind of guy writing his story on Reddit. But here I am, 3 months after everything fell apart, finally ready to tell someone what happened. Maybe writing it down will help me process it. Maybe some of you have been through something similar. I do not know. All I know is that I need to get this off my chest. My name is Michael. I am 35 years old. I work in logistics management for a mid-sized shipping company in the Midwest. Nothing fancy, nothing glamorous. Just a regular guy with a regular job, trying to live a regular life. Or at least, that is what I thought my life was. 2 months ago, my father died. Arthur. He was 72. Lung cancer. The aggressive kind that does not give you much time to say goodbye. From diagnosis to death, we had about 4 months. 4 months of watching the strongest man I had ever known shrink into a hollow shell in a hospital bed. The hospital became my second home during those months. St. Mary's Medical Center, 5th floor, room 512. I can still smell that place if I close my eyes. That sharp chemical tang of industrial cleaner, trying to mask the smell of sickness and death. The fluorescent lights that hum constantly, giving everyone a pale, washed-out look. The squeaking of nurses' shoes on linoleum floors at all hours. My wife, Vanessa, came with me most days. We had been married for 3 years at that point. Met her at a corporate training seminar. If you can believe that, she worked in pharmaceutical sales. Beautiful woman. Confident. The kind of person who lights up a room when she walks in. I thought I was lucky. Looking back now, I can see the signs. But when you are in the middle of something, when you love someone, you make excuses. You tell yourself stories to explain away the little things that do not quite add up. The first time I really noticed something off was about 6 weeks before Dad died. We were in his hospital room, late evening. The sun had set, and the window turned into a dark mirror, reflecting the room back at us. Dad was sleeping, his breathing labored and wet sounding through the oxygen tubes. The machines beat their steady rhythm. Beep, 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 like a countdown clock nobody wanted to acknowledge. I was sitting in the uncomfortable chair next to his bed, holding his hand. His skin felt like paper. Thin, fragile. You could see every vein, every bone. This was the man who taught me how to throw a football, how to change a tire, how to stand up for myself. Now he could barely lift a cup of water. I needed comfort. I needed my wife to tell me it would be okay, even if we both knew it would not be. I stood up and turned toward the window where Vanessa was standing, looking out at the parking lot below. The thing about hospital windows at night is that they become mirrors, perfect reflections. I could see her clearly, even though her back was to me, and I could see what was on her phone screen. Zillow, the real estate app. She was scrolling through a listing for a house. Not just any house. A massive colonial-style place with white pillars and a circular driveway. The kind of house you see in movies about rich people. The price was right there at the top of the screen. $2.5 million. I stopped mid-step. My brain tried to process what I was seeing. We lived in a nice enough 3-bedroom ranch that we had bought together. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. Why was she looking at houses that cost more than we would make in 20 lifetimes? Then it clicked. She was planning. She was looking at what we could buy with Dad's money, with my inheritance, while he was still breathing, still alive in the bed behind us. She was shopping for mansions. I must have made a noise, or maybe she sensed me approaching, because she suddenly locked her phone screen. The window went dark. She turned to me with a smile, the kind of smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She asked if I was okay. She put her arms around me. I let her hold me, even though something cold had settled in my chest. I told myself I was overreacting. Grief does strange things to your mind. Maybe she was just browsing, just daydreaming. People do that, right? Window shopping online, imagining a different life. It does not mean anything. But the seed of doubt was planted. And once you start noticing things, you cannot stop. Over the next few weeks, I caught other moments. Small things. The way she would perk up whenever Dad's estate was mentioned. How she started asking questions about the will, about Dad's company, about what would happen to his assets. She framed it as concern, as one to help me through the process. But there was an eagerness underneath that I could not ignore. One afternoon, we were having lunch in the hospital cafeteria. Dad was having some tests done, so we had an hour to kill. Vanessa was on her phone, tapping away. I asked what she was looking at. She said she was just checking her email. Work stuff. But I saw the screen for a split second before she angled it away. It was a financial calculator. She was running numbers. Big numbers. I should have said something then. I should have asked her directly what she was doing. But I did not. Because admitting that your wife might be counting down the days until your father dies so she can get her hands on his money is not something you want to face. It is easier to pretend everything is fine. To tell yourself you are imagining things. The worst part was how good she was at playing the role. When we were around other people, around the nurses, or Dad's friends who came to visit, she was perfect, caring, supportive. She would hold my hand, rest her head on my shoulder, dab at her eyes with a tissue. Everyone told me how lucky I was to have such a devoted wife during this difficult time. And I believed them. I wanted to believe them. Dad had good days and bad days. Toward the end, the bad days outnumbered the good ones by a lot. There was one evening, about a week before he passed, when he was more lucid than he had been in days. The nurses had adjusted his medication. And for a few hours, he seemed almost like himself again. Vanessa had gone down to the cafeteria to grab coffee. She said she needed a break from the room, that the smell of antiseptic was giving her a headache. I did not blame her. The smell was pretty intense. As soon as she left, Dad opened his eyes and looked at me. Really looked at me. Not the glazed, distant stare he had been giving me for weeks, but a sharp, focused look that reminded me of the man he used to be. He gestured for me to come closer. His hand was shaking, but the motion was clear. I leaned in, my ear near his mouth. His breath was sour, medicinal. He could barely speak above a whisper, but his words were clear enough. He told me I was blind. He said I could not see what was right in front of me. He asked if I noticed how she looked at his watch, at his belongings, but never at him. Not really. He said she was counting the days. Counting the money. I tried to interrupt, to tell him he was wrong, that the medication was making him confused. But he squeezed my hand with surprising strength and kept talking. He said that when he was gone, I would understand. He said he was sorry, that he was going to have to hurt me to save me. He said he had made arrangements, done things that would protect me even if I did not understand them yet. I was crying by then, tears running down my face, dripping onto the scratchy hospital blanket. I begged him not to talk like that. I told him he was going to get better, that he would come home, that we would figure everything out together. All the lies people tell when someone is dying. He just smiled, a sad, knowing smile. He patted my hand and closed his eyes. When Vanessa came back 10 minutes later with 2 cups of terrible cafeteria coffee, I was still sitting there, holding Dad's hand, crying. She set the cups down and put her arm around my shoulders. She asked what was wrong, if something had happened. I told her Dad had been talking, that he was worried about me. I did not mention what he actually said. Some part of me, even then, wanted to protect her, wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. She made soothing noises, rubbed my back, told me it was just the illness talking. She said dying people sometimes say strange things, that I should not take it to heart. And I nodded. I agreed. I let her comfort me. But Dad's words stayed with me. They echoed in my head every time I looked at her. He died on a Tuesday morning, 3:47 a.m. I was not there when it happened. We had gone home to get some sleep, and the hospital called us around 3:30 to say we should come back, that his vitals were failing. We threw on clothes and drove through empty streets. The city looks different at that hour, deserted, like a movie set after everyone has gone home. Vanessa was quiet in the passenger seat, staring out the window. I kept glancing at her, trying to read her expression in the glow of streetlights. Her face was blank, calm. By the time we got to the hospital, it was over. The nurse met us outside the room and told us he had passed peacefully a few minutes earlier. I remember thanking her, which is such a strange thing to do. Thanking someone for telling you your father is dead. They let me go in to see him. He looked smaller somehow, now that the machines were quiet. No more beeping. No more labored breathing. Just silence. I stood there for a while, I do not know how long, just looking at him, trying to memorize his face, trying to accept that he was really gone. Eventually, I walked out into the hallway to find Vanessa. I needed her. I needed to not be alone with this crushing weight in my chest. She was at the end of the corridor, by the windows overlooking the parking lot, the same windows where I had first seen her looking at houses. She had her phone to her ear. She was talking to someone. I was maybe 15 feet away when I heard her say it. Her voice was flat, businesslike. She said that, yes, it was over. It was finished. She told whoever was on the other end of that call to start preparing the paperwork for probate, for the estate transfer. There was no emotion in her voice. No sadness. No grief. She could have been discussing a grocery list. I must have made a sound, or maybe she just sensed me there, because she turned. Her eyes met mine. And for just a fraction of a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Not sadness. Not guilt. Something else. Calculation, maybe, or satisfaction. Then her expression shifted, like a switch being flipped. Her eyes filled with tears. Her voice broke. She said into the phone that she had to go, that her husband needed her. She hung up and rushed toward me, arms outstretched. She hugged me tight, pressing her face against my chest, making crying sounds. She told me how sorry she was, how much she knew I was hurting, how we would get through this together. I stood there, arms at my sides, feeling her press against me, feeling nothing. That cold sensation from weeks earlier, that little kernel of doubt, had spread through my entire body. I was numb, not from grief, though that was there too, but from the sudden, terrible clarity that maybe my father had been right. Maybe I really was blind. We drove home in silence as the sun came up. Vanessa fell asleep in the passenger seat, or pretended to. I kept my eyes on the road, both hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. I thought about the Zillow listings, the financial calculators, the eager questions about this state, the phone call in the hospital corridor, all the little moments that I had explained away, excused, ignored. And I thought about what Dad had said, that he was going to have to hurt me to save me. At the time, I had no idea what he meant. I figured he was just rambling, or maybe talking about the pain of losing him. I did not understand. Not yet. But I would. Oh, God! I would understand soon enough. The funeral was in 4 days. The reading of the will was scheduled for the week after that. And my entire life was about to implode in ways I could not possibly imagine. The funeral was a blur. I remember faces, condolences, casseroles. So many casseroles. Why do people bring food when someone dies? Like carbs and cheese can fill the hole left behind. But I appreciated the gesture anyway. It is what people do. It is how we show we care when words fail us. Vanessa was perfect that day. She wore a black dress, held my hand, accepted sympathy from distant relatives I barely remembered. She cried at all the right moments. I watched her dab at her eyes with a tissue during the service, and I wanted so badly to believe those tears were real. But I kept hearing that phone call. That flat, businesslike tone. It was over. Start preparing the paperwork. The reading of the will was scheduled for following Tuesday, a week and a half after we buried Dad. The lawyer handling the estate was a guy named Robert Sterling. He had worked with my father for 20 years, managing the legal side of the family business. Dad had built a successful logistics and warehousing company from nothing. Started with one truck and a dream back in the 80s, grew it into a regional empire worth tens of millions. I always assumed I would inherit the company. Not because I deserved it necessarily, but because I was the only child. That is how these things work, right? You build something, you pass it down. Legacy, tradition, all that. Vanessa certainly assumed it too. In the days leading up to the appointment with Sterling, she was different. Nervous energy radiated off her. She kept checking her phone, pacing around the house, asking me what time we needed to leave, whether I had the address. If I was sure Sterling had said Tuesday, I told her to relax. I told her everything would be fine. I had no idea how wrong I was. Sterling's office was downtown, in one of those old buildings with marble floors and with paneling that smells like furniture polish and old money. We sat in leather chairs across from his massive desk. He was in his 60s, gray hair, expensive suit, the kind of guy who looks like he has seen everything and is not impressed by any of it. He opened a folder and pulled out several documents. He put on reading glasses and looked at us over the frames. He asked if we were ready to proceed. I nodded. Vanessa was gripping the armrest of her chair, so hard her knuckles were white. Sterling started reading. Legal language, mostly, whereas and heretofore and all that nonsense lawyers love. But the meaning became clear pretty quickly. To my son, Michael, I leave the sum of $150,000 to be distributed from my personal accounts. I also leave him my personal effects, including my watch collection, my tools, and the contents of my home office. I felt Vanessa go rigid next to me. Sterling kept reading. The entirety of my business assets, including all shares and controlling interest in Arthurton Logistics, estimated value $40 million, are to be placed in a blind trust managed by Robert Sterling as trustee. Michael will have no access to these funds or control of the company during the trust period. The room went silent. I could hear the clock on Sterling's wall ticking. Tick, tick, tick. I did not understand. $150,000? That was it? And the company, $40 million worth of blood, sweat, and tears, locked away where I cannot touch it? I asked Sterling what a blind trust meant. He explained it in that calm, professional way lawyers have when they're delivering bad news. It meant the assets were managed by a trustee. I had no say in business decisions. I could not access the funds. I could not sell my shares. The trust had conditions that needed to be met before it would be dissolved and the assets transferred to me. I asked what conditions. Sterling said those details were confidential and would be disclosed at the appropriate time. I looked at Vanessa. Her face had gone pale. Not sad pale. Not shocked pale. Angry pale. Her jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. Her fingers were digging into the leather armrest like she wanted to rip it apart. She did not say anything. Not there. Not in Sterling's office. She sat through the rest of the reading in complete silence, staring straight ahead with glassy eyes. When we got back to the car, she still did not speak. She just sat in the passenger seat, staring out the windshield, her phone in her lap. I started driving home. The silence was suffocating. I tried to make conversation. I said something stupid like, at least we had the $150,000, that it was more than a lot of people get, that we would figure things out. She did not respond. She just started typing on her phone, furiously, her thumbs flying across the screen. We got home around 3 in the afternoon. I went to the kitchen to make coffee. My hands were shaking as I filled the pot with water. I could not process what had just happened. Why would Dad do this? Lock away everything he had built, and leave me with what amounted to pocket change compared to the company's value? I heard Vanessa coming behind me. I turned around, hoping we could talk about it, figure out what it meant together. She exploded. She started screaming about how I had let my father screw us over, how I should have known this was coming, how I should have fought harder, talked to him, done something to prevent this. She yelled about our credit card debt, about the mortgage, about the car payments. She said we were drowning, and I had just let my father throw us an anchor instead of a life preserver. I tried to defend myself. I said I had no idea Dad was going to do this. I said the trust must have conditions, that maybe it would be released soon, that Sterling would explain everything eventually. But even as I said it, I knew it sounded weak, pathetic. She asked how I could be so naive. She asked if I was really that stupid, that blind to what was happening. She said my father had never respected me, never thought I was good enough to run his precious company. And this trust was proof of it. That one hurt, because part of me wondered if she was right. The fight went on for hours. She would scream at me, then storm off to another room. I would follow, trying to calm her down, try to fix things. She would start screaming again. It was exhausting, brutal. Every word felt like a punch. Around midnight, she finally went quiet. She sat on the couch, arms crossed, staring at nothing. I sat down next to her, keeping some distance. I did not know what to say anymore. I had apologized, explained, rationalized. Nothing worked. Then an idea hit me. A terrible, stupid idea that felt like genius at the time. The $150,000 was sitting in my personal account. It was inheritance, legally mine, but we had a joint checking account we used for bills and household stuff. If I moved the money there, it would become ours. Shared. A team effort. Maybe that would show her we were in this together. Maybe that would fix things. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. My hands were still shaking, but now it was from nerves, from the desperate hope that this would work. I navigated to the transfer screen. $150,000. From my personal account to our joint account. I told Vanessa to look. I turned the phone toward her. I said we would use this to pay off the credit cards, to get ahead on the mortgage, to take some pressure off. I said we were a team, that we would figure out the rest together, that the trust situation did not matter because we had each other. I hit the transfer button. The confirmation popped up on screen. Transaction complete. $150,000, now in our joint account. I looked at Vanessa, expecting relief, gratitude, something. Her phone buzzed. Bank notification. She looked down at the screen. I watched her eyes scan the message. Deposit received. Her expression changed. Not to happiness. Not to relief. To something cold. Calculating. She looked up at me and said I was right. She said she needed to sleep, to process everything. She said she would feel better in the morning. Then she stood up and walked to the bedroom, without another word. I sat there on the couch, staring at my phone, feeling like I had just done something important. Something that proved my love. That showed my commitment. I was an idiot. Over the next 2 weeks, things got worse. Vanessa barely spoke to me. When she did, it was short, clipped sentences. She stopped sleeping in our bed, said she needed space to think. She moved into the guest room. She was on her phone constantly. At breakfast, during dinner, late at night when she thought I was asleep. I could hear her typing through the wall. Sometimes I heard her voice, low and urgent, talking to someone. When I asked who she was talking to, she said it was her sister, her mother, her friend from work. Always someone different. The house felt like a tomb. We moved around each other like ghosts. I went to work, came home, watched TV, went to bed. She did the same, but in different rooms on a different schedule. We were roommates at best, strangers at worst. I tried to talk to her a few times, asked what she was thinking, whether we could work through this, what she needed from me. She always said the same thing. She needed time. She needed space. She needed to figure things out. I gave her time. I gave her space. I thought that was what you were supposed to do. 3 weeks after the reading of the will, I woke up on a Thursday morning to an empty house. At first, I did not realize anything was wrong. Vanessa was usually up before me, already gone to work by the time my alarm went off. But when I walked into the kitchen to make coffee, I noticed things were missing. Small things. The fancy blender she had bought last year, her laptop from the counter, the picture frame from the living room. I walked faster, checking rooms. The guest room closet was half empty. Her clothes gone. Her toiletries from the bathroom gone. The expensive luggage set we had bought for our honeymoon gone. My heart was pounding. I was moving room to room now, almost running, looking for some sign that this was not what it looked like. Maybe she had gone on a trip. Maybe she had said something, and I forgot. Maybe there was an explanation. I went back to the kitchen. That is when I saw it, sitting on the counter, propped up against the coffee maker. A business card. Not a note. Not a letter. Not even a sticky note with a few words scribbled on it. Just a business card. White, embossed lettering. Professional. Jennifer Hartman, attorney at law. Family law and divorce. I picked it up. My hands were numb. The card felt heavy, like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I flipped it over. Nothing on the back. No message. No explanation. Just a name, the phone number, the address. I stood there in my kitchen, in my pajamas, holding a business card, trying to understand what had just happened. She was gone. She had waited until I moved the money into the joint account, until it became community property or whatever the legal term was. Then she had packed her things, found a divorce lawyer, and walked out. She had played me, used me, waited for the perfect moment. I sat down at the kitchen table. I did not know how long I sat there. The coffee maker finished brewing and started beeping at me. I ignored it. The sun moved across the floor. My phone rang a few times. I did not answer. I kept thinking about Dad's words in the hospital. You are blind. Son, when I am gone, you will understand. I had to hurt you to save you. He knew. Somehow, he knew this would happen. He knew what Vanessa was, what she wanted, and he had tried to protect me the only way he could. But I did not understand. I still did not get it. Why take the inheritance away if he knew she was going to leave anyway? Why lock the company in a trust one could not access? What good did that do me now? I called in sick to work. I sat in that house for 2 days, barely eating, barely sleeping, just existing in this strange limbo where my wife had left me, and I did not know why giving her everything had not been enough. On Saturday, I finally called the number on the business card. A receptionist answered. I told her who I was, that my wife had left me this card. She put me on hold. Elevator music played. Something instrumental and depressing. Then a woman picked up. Jennifer Hartman herself. She had a professional voice, polite but detached. She told me her office would be sending over divorce papers within the week. She said Vanessa was seeking a division of assets and wanted to handle this as smoothly as possible for both parties. I asked to speak to Vanessa. Hartman said her client did not wish to have direct contact at this time. I asked why. Why now? Why like this? Hartman said those were questions I should discuss with my own attorney. Then she hung up. I sat on my couch in my empty house and finally let myself cry. Not the grief crying from losing Dad. This was different. This was the crying you do when you realize you've been played for a fool. When you understand that someone you love saw you as nothing more than a paycheck, a means to an end. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that I still did not understand why she left after I gave her the money. In my head, giving her access to the inheritance should have made her stay, should have proved I was committed, should have fixed things. I did not know about community property laws. I did not know about asset division and divorce. I did not know that by putting that money in our joint account, I had just made it easier for her to take half of everything I had left. I would not learn that until later, until I sat across from my own lawyer and heard words like commingling of funds and marital assets and equitable distribution. All I knew, sitting in my empty house that Saturday, was that my father was dead, my wife was gone, and I had $150,000 that was supposed to fix everything but had somehow made it all worse. I picked up Dad's watch from the coffee table, the one from his personal effects that Sterling had given me, a Rolex Submariner from 1982, the year I was born. Dad had worn it every day of my life. I put it on my wrist. It was heavy, real. The second hand swept around the face. Tick, tick, tick. I did not know it yet, but that watch was worth more than any amount of money, because it was a reminder, a symbol of what I had lost and what I still had to learn. My father had tried to teach me one last lesson, and I had failed the test spectacularly. But the test was not over, not by a long shot. The real education was about to begin. I found a lawyer through a friend of a friend. His name was Tom Berkowitz, operated out of a strip mall office between a nail salon and a tax preparation place. Not exactly prestigious, but he was affordable, which was all that mattered at that point. My finances were a disaster. I had about $70,000 left in my personal account after paying for Dad's funeral and settling some of his final medical bills. The joint account, the one with $150,000 I had stupidly deposited, was frozen pending the divorce proceedings. Tom was in his 50s, balding, with a coffee stain on his tie that he did not seem to notice or care about. He looked tired, like he had seen this story 1,000 times and knew exactly how it would end. I sat across from him in his cramped office while he reviewed the divorce papers Vanessa's lawyer had sent over. He was quiet for a long time, just reading, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. The clock on his wall ticked loudly. The fluorescent lights hummed. I could smell nail polish remover seeping through the wall from next door. Finally, Tom set the papers down and looked at me over his reading glasses. He asked when I had deposited the inheritance into the joint account. I told him, 3 days after the will was read. He asked if anyone had advised me to keep it separate. I said no. I said I did it to show my wife we were a team. Tom sighed, a long, heavy sigh that told me everything I needed to know before he said a word. He explained that I had made a critical mistake. He used the term commingling of funds. By depositing my inheritance, which was legally my separate property, into a joint marital account, I had converted it into community property, marital assets, subject to division in the divorce. I asked what that meant in plain English. Tom said it meant Vanessa was entitled to half. $75,000 of the money my father had left me was now legally hers. There was nothing we could do about it. I had gift-wrapped it for her the moment I hit that transfer button. I sat there, numb. I asked if there was any way to argue that she had manipulated me, that she had planned this. Tom said unless I had proof of fraud or coercion, which I did not, the law was clear. The money was in a joint account. She had equal claim to it. But it got worse. Vanessa was also seeking half the value of our house. We had bought it together 5 years ago, both our names on the mortgage and the deed, with the current market value. Her half came to about $90,000. Between the house and the inheritance, I was looking at losing over $160,000. Tom asked about assets, about what I earned, about debts. I told him everything. My salary was decent, but not great. We had credit card debt, about $30,000. That would also be split. Car payments. The usual American financial disaster. That passes for normal these days. He asked about the trust. I explained what Sterling had told me. $40 million locked away, no access, no timeline. Tom said that was actually good news. Since I had no access to the trust, it could not be considered a marital asset. Vanessa could not touch it. That was the first piece of good news I had heard in weeks. Not that it mattered much. $40 million I could not access might as well have been on Mars. The divorce process was brutal. Not because we fought over things. We did not. Vanessa was smart enough to take the settlement offer Tom negotiated. She got her $75,000 from the inheritance. She got her share of the house equity. I sold the house within a month to pay her out. We split the debt. The whole thing was businesslike, efficient, cold. I never spoke to her directly. Everything went through the lawyers. Every question, every document, every decision. It was like she had erased me from her life completely. Like I was just a line item on a spreadsheet. The house sold fast. Hot market. I walked away with about $40,000 after paying Vanessa, settling the mortgage, and covering closing costs. $40,000 from a house we had lived in for 5 years. I used part of it to pay Tom's fees and the rest to move into a studio apartment across town, 600 square feet. One room that served as bedroom, living room, and dining room. A bathroom the size of a closet. A kitchenette with a mini fridge and a 2-burner stove. This was rock bottom. This was what my life had become. I worked. I came home. I ate frozen dinners in front of the TV. I slept on an air mattress because I could not afford a real bed yet. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbors arguing, laughing, living their lives. I felt like a ghost haunting my own existence. About a month into living in the studio, my buddy Greg showed me something on his phone. He looked uncomfortable about it. Like he did not want to show me, but felt like I needed to know. It was Vanessa's Instagram. She had unblocked him, apparently, or maybe she just did not care anymore who saw her posts. There she was, on a beach somewhere tropical. Turquoise water, white sand. She was wearing a designer sundress. The kind that cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was perfect. Her smile was wide. She looked happy, free, unburdened. The caption said something about new beginnings and treating yourself and living your best life. Hashtag blessed. Hashtag grateful. I stared at that photo for a long time. That dress probably cost $1,000. The resort she was staying at, based on the tag location, ran about $500 a night minimum. She was spending my father's money. The money he had worked his entire life to build. The money she had manipulated me into handing over. And she was happy about it. Greg took his phone back and told me I should stop looking at her social media. He said it would not do me any good. He was right, but the damage was done. That image was burned into my brain. I went to Dad's grave that weekend. The cemetery was quiet, just the sound of wind moving through the trees and the distant hum of traffic from the highway. His headstone was simple. Arthur Chun, beloved father. The dates of his birth and death. Nothing fancy. That is how he would have wanted it. I stood there for a while, hands in my pockets, trying to figure out what to say. Finally, I just spoke out loud. I told him he was right. I told him he knew exactly what she would do. I called myself an idiot. I apologized for not listening, for not seeing it sooner. The wind rustled the leaves. A crow cawed somewhere nearby. No answer came, because that is not how the world works. But I felt better for saying out loud, for admitting it. I told him I wished I understood why he locked away the company. I said I could have used that money now, could have protected myself better. But even as I said it, I knew that was not true. If I had access to $40 million, Vanessa would have taken half of that too. Maybe that was the point. Maybe Dad knew the only way to protect his life's work was to put it somewhere she could not reach it. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in November, 6 months after Dad died. 6 months that felt like 6 years. The courthouse was downtown, same building where I got my marriage license 3 years earlier. Funny how life brings you full circle like that. Same marble floors, same echoing hallways, different purpose entirely. I sat in the courtroom waiting for my case to be called. There were 3 other divorces scheduled that morning. It was like an assembly line. Judge calls the names, both parties stand, lawyer confirms the agreement, judge signs a decree. Next case. Vanessa was there with her lawyer, Jennifer Hartman, sitting on the opposite side of the courtroom. She looked good, professional, put together, navy blue suit, hair styled. She was scrolling through her phone, not even acknowledging my presence. When our names were called, we both stood. The judge, an older woman with gray hair and reading glasses on a chain, reviewed the agreement. She asked if both parties understood the terms and agreed to the division of assets. We both said yes. She asked if there was any coercion or duress. We both said no. She signed a decree. Just like that. 3 years of marriage dissolved with a signature and a stamp. The gavel came down. Case dismissed. Next, I walked out of that courthouse into the cold November air and felt nothing. Not sadness, not anger, not relief, just emptiness. Like someone had scooped out my insides and left a hollow shell. Vanessa walked out a minute later, already on her phone. She got into a BMW. New from the looks of it. Probably bought with my inheritance. She drove away without looking back. I stood there on the courthouse steps for a while, holding the folder with my copy of the divorce decree. People walked past me, going about their lives, their dramas, their problems. The world kept turning. It did not care that my life had just officially ended. My truck was parked 3 blocks away. An old Ford F-150 I had bought used 10 years ago. It was still running barely, but it got me where I needed to go. I walked slowly, in no rush to get anywhere. There was nothing waiting for me except that empty studio apartment and another frozen dinner. I got to the truck and climbed in. The seat was cold. The engine turned over with a rough cough. I just sat there for a minute, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer. I was not in the mood to talk to anyone, especially not a spam call about my car's extended warranty. But something made me pick up. Maybe curiosity. Maybe fate. Maybe just a desperate hope that anything might be better than sitting in this truck feeling sorry for myself. It was Robert Sterling. His voice was calm, professional, the same tone he had used when reading Dad's will months ago. He asked if I had just left the courthouse. I told him yes, that I had the divorce decree in my hand. He asked if it was finalized, if the judge had signed it, if it had the official seal. I looked at the document. There it was, the raised seal, the judge's signature, official and binding. I told him yes. Everything was done. Legal. Final. There was a pause on the line. Then Sterling said I needed to come to his office. Right away, there was something I needed to see. Something Dad had left instructions about, but only to be disclosed after the divorce was completely finalized. I asked what he was talking about. He said he could not discuss it over the phone. He just repeated that I needed to come in. Now, today, it was important. I said I would be there in 20 minutes. He said he would be waiting. I hung up and sat there, staring at the phone. What the hell was this about? Another twist? Another surprise? I did not know if I could handle any more surprises. But I started the truck and headed towards Sterling's office anyway. Because what else was I going to do? Go home to my empty apartment and eat microwave pasta while staring at the walls? At least this was something. Movement. Purpose. Even if I had no idea where it was leading. 20 minutes later, I was back in Sterling's office. Same leather chairs. Same wood paneling. Same smell of furniture polish and old money. Sterling was waiting for me, sitting behind his massive desk with a folder in front of him. A large manila envelope sat next to it, sealed, with my name written on the front in my father's handwriting. I sat down. Sterling asked to see the divorce decree. I handed it over. He examined it carefully, checking the signature, the seal, the date. He nodded, satisfied, and handed it back to me. Then he opened the folder and pulled out a document. He said what he was about to tell me would explain everything. Why Dad had structured the will the way he did. Why the trust existed. Why I had been left with only $150,000 instead of the company. Sterling explained that Dad had included something called a predatory spouse protection clause in the trust. It was designed to protect assets from someone who married purely for financial gain. The terms were simple. If my marriage lasted 18 months after Dad's death, the trust would be dissolved and the assets would become marital property, split according to state law. But if the marriage ended before that 18-month mark, the trust would transfer entirely to me, tax-free, the moment the divorce was finalized. 18 months. Dad had given Vanessa a test. Stay married for a year and a half after his death. Prove the marriage was real, and she would share in a fortune. But leave early, show her true colors, and she would get nothing. I sat there, processing this. The timeline suddenly made perfect sense. Dad died in May. Vanessa left in June. The divorce was finalized in November. 7 months. She had needed to wait 11 more months. Just 11 months. And she would have been entitled to half of $40 million. But she could not do it. She saw that $150,000 and could not wait. She thought that was all there was. She thought she was cutting her losses and taking what she could get before wasting more time on a marriage to someone she saw as a failure. Her greed had destroyed her. Her impatience. Her inability to see the long game. Sterling pulled out another set of documents. Transfer papers. He said that as of this moment, I was the sole owner of Arthurton Logistics. $40 million in assets. The company. The real estate. The investments. Everything. He slid the papers across the desk. He said all I had to do was sign. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking. I could barely believe what I was hearing. 7 months ago, I thought I had lost everything. And now, suddenly, I had more than I ever imagined. I signed the papers. Sterling witnessed a signature, stamped them, filed them. Just like that, I went from living in a studio apartment eating ramen noodles to being the owner of a $40 million company. Sterling stood up and shook my hand. He said my father had been a brilliant man, and that this plan had taken months to structure legally. He said Dad had known exactly what he was doing. He was protecting me the only way he could. I left Sterling's office in a daze. I got back in my truck and just sat there, trying to process what had happened. My phone was buzzing. Text messages, emails. Word was already getting out. Business associates, employees. The news had hit the industry channels. Michael Chen was now in control of his father's empire. I drove home, but not to the studio apartment. I drove to Dad's house. My house now, technically. It had been sitting empty since he died, locked up, waiting. Sterling had given me the keys. I walked through the rooms. Everything was exactly as Dad had left it. His coffee cup still in the sink. His reading glasses on the side table. His office, with decades of files and photos and memories. I went to his desk and sat in his chair. It creaked under my weight, worn in from years of use. This was where he had built everything, where he had planned, where he had worked late into the night, building something that would last, and where he had crafted this final lesson for me. 3 days passed. I spent a meeting with managers, reviewing financials, learning the business I now owned. It was overwhelming, exciting, terrifying, but it felt right, like I was finally stepping into something I was meant to do. On the 4th day, my assistant, a woman named Carol who had worked for Dad for 15 years, buzzed my office line. She sounded uncomfortable. She said there was someone here to see me. She did not have an appointment, but she said it was urgent. I asked who it was. Carol hesitated. Then she said it was my ex-wife. I sat back in my chair. Dad's chair. My chair now. I looked around the office, at the awards on the walls, the photos, the legacy. I told Carol to send her in. A minute later, Vanessa walked through the door. She looked different, not as polished. Her makeup was a little too heavy, like she had been crying and tried to cover it up. Her hands were shaking slightly. She was wearing an expensive outfit, probably bought with my inheritance money, but it did not look right on her now. It looked desperate. She closed the door behind her. She stood there, not quite meeting my eyes, wringing her hands. She started talking, fast, rambling. She said she had made a mistake, that her lawyer had misled her, convinced her to move too quickly. She said she had been confused, overwhelmed by grief, not thinking clearly. She said she still loved me, that we could fix this, that the divorce was a mistake. She was crying, real tears this time, streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. She begged me to give her another chance. She said she would sign a post-nuptial agreement, anything I wanted, if I would just take her back. I sat there, watching her performance. And that is what it was, a performance. Maybe she even believed some of it herself, but I could see through it now. I could see exactly what Dad had seen. I let her finish. I did not interrupt. I just listened, calm, detached, watching her scramble for purchase on a cliff she had thrown herself off of. When she finally ran out of words, when the silence stretched between us, I spoke. I told her she had failed a test. I explained what Dad had done, the 18-month clause, the protection built into the trust. I told her that if she had actually loved me, if the marriage had been real, she would have stayed. We would have weathered the storm together. And a year from now, we would have owned everything together. But she could not do it. She saw $150,000 and ran. She sold our marriage, sold 3 years of my life, for $75,000 after legal fees. That was her price. That was what I was worth to her. She started to protest, to explain, to make excuses. I held up my hand. She stopped talking. I told her I understood now. I understood that my father had loved me enough to hurt me, to teach me the hardest lesson I would ever learn. He showed me exactly who she was, and he made sure that when the truth came out, I would be protected. I told her to leave. I said there was nothing more to discuss. What was done was done. She made her choice. She lost. That was life. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, ruining her designer blouse. She opened her mouth to say something else, but I pressed the intercom button. I told Carol to have security escort the guest out. Vanessa's eyes went wide. She said my name, once, soft, pleading. I did not respond. I just looked at her. A long, level look. The look of someone who finally understood the game. Security arrived. 2 guys in uniforms. Professional. Polite. They asked Vanessa to come with them. She looked at me one more time, mascara running, desperation written all over her face. Then she turned and walked out. I watched the door close. Heard her footsteps fade down the hallway. Heard the elevator ding. And then there was silence. I sat alone in my office. My father's office. The office where he had built an empire and plotted the salvation of his son. I took off the Rolex he had left me. The one from 1982. I looked at it, really looked at it, for the first time. On the back, engraved, were words I had never noticed before. Trust takes time. Truth reveals itself. Love protects, even when it hurts. I put the watch back on my wrist. It fit perfectly now. Not too heavy, not too loose. Just right. I turned my chair to face the window. The city stretched out below me, busy, moving, alive. I had lost everything. My father, my wife, my naivety, my trust. But in losing those things, I had gained something more valuable. Wisdom, clarity, purpose, and the knowledge that my father had loved me enough to save me from myself. The test was over. The lesson was learned. And I was finally ready to do the work. I picked up the phone and called Carol. I told her to clear my schedule for the rest of the day. I had a company to learn, a legacy to honor, a life to build. She said she would take care of it. I hung up and sat there for a moment longer, letting it all sink in. Then I opened my laptop and got to work. Because that is what you do. You learn. You adapt. You move forward. You build something that lasts. My father taught me that. In the end, he taught me everything I needed to know. I just had to lose everything to finally understand.